Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Beyond the Hub. I'm Holly, Head of Marketing, and I am speaking to Hannah Fisher. She's one of our CRM platform consultants here at BabelQuest. Hannah's developed a little bit of an internal sort of specialism to be like the go-to data person. So we thought it would be great to talk to her about her tips for the HubSpot admin for organizing data in HubSpot. Thank you, Hannah.
Oh, my pleasure.
Um, let's start at the beginning. So there's loads of stuff to consider when you're like whether you've got data in HubSpot already or if you're bringing data in, if you're importing it. So what do businesses need to be thinking about for that scenario when they're importing, like before they even get into HubSpot?
I think the first thing to consider is your overall data strategy. So what type of data do you actually need in your CRM? Like how will it be used? What is its purpose going to be? Often when we work with clients on CRM migrations, it stems from a desire to want to like unclutter data from across multiple siloed systems and bring it all together in one centralized place. But in my opinion, it's really important to understand and migrate only data that is relevant to current business processes.
Mm.
And sometimes defining what is important, what is valuable data is hard, and people can be very protective over their data, especially if you're suggesting letting some of it go. And the way that I would approach that is to map out some clear core objectives for your CRM implementation, which can serve as guiding principles for making data related decisions. So their core objectives, they might be to improve your sales process visibility because you want better insight into your sales pipeline and the stages, or to streamline marketing campaigns to automate segmentation and target the right audience based on your behavior and interests. And then you want to go through each of your like legacy data points and categorize them based on their relevance to your objectives.
Yeah.
If the data point is capturing something that's related to a legacy way of working, such as tags from an old marketing strategy or fax numbers that no one uses anymore, then you probably don't need it in your new CRM. And then, once you've kind of got that strategy in place, I think the next thing to consider is the quality of the data. So even though it might be a data point that is valuable to migrate across, such as emails and phone numbers, if the actual quality of the phone numbers and emails that you're trying to move across, if it's full of values like unknown and 1234 NA at NA.com, it's
Yeah.
not possible to move
I've
across.
seen it.
And then the kind of the last thing, you know what you want to move across. Is it in a good quality? Is it clean? It's kind of that compliance piece around should you retain this data, should you move it across to a new system?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. I like it's so tempting. It's like decluttering your house. It's so tempting to just think, oh, well, I might need this like one day in the future. So I'm going to keep it just in case. Like from a marketing perspective, I always like for our marketing data think I have like three basic principles for each piece of data. Can I use it to target? Can I use it to personalize my communications, or can I use it to inform my strategy? And I try to think, well, if I don't need it, um, for targeting, personalization, or reporting, informing my strategy, and I try to let it go. But it is like easier said than done. Like I'm in our business, I don't need to know what your birthday is, but I do need to know what your interest areas are. So yeah, it is tough. But I guess like speaking about like data points and properties, there's loads of default properties in HubSpot. Um, are there any additional properties you usually recommend for people for businesses, like regardless of what industry they're in?
Good question. I think that source properties are really key. And
Mhm.
we're lucky with HubSpot specifically that it has the original source and the latest source properties.
Mm.
Once you've got your tech stack connected up, all your online data should be automatically source stamped with drill downs. It's not as good at capturing offline sources. And sometimes
I hate that. I hate even thinking of that. Like off the when I see offline sources, I'm like, no.
yeah, it's always like 80% of the record sources
Yeah.
offline.
God.
So I think mapping out source properties and what you need, again, like you said, like what is the purpose of this value within this custom source property, and then also, you know, how are you getting it populated? I think
Mm.
they're a really good one for every CRM to have, regardless of industry.
Yeah. And yeah, original, like you said, original source is great. We definitely use our own. We have a couple of other properties where we track different types of sources. And I think for most businesses, like you say, they will definitely need something above and beyond the original source and latest source features. Um, so I guess the next thing is something else to talk about is like what are like the basics or the best ways that people can keep their data organized sort of ongoing. If you think about like workflows, data sets, anything with custom code, we've got, you know, Ops Hub. Is there anything around like what do you recommend?
I guess I'd take it even like more simple than workflows, data sets, custom code. And I just think that the key or like a is to have a real solid foundation in terms of the configuration of your CRM. So mapping it out so it aligns with your business processes and it's capturing and surfacing relevant information only at each stage. And I guess to that end, you know, keeping the records clean and not cluttered with all, you know, irrelevant information and modules. HubSpot is really cool. It can do lots of things, and I think people are often tempted to put a lot of what I'd call like noise on the records, and
Mm.
actually sometimes stripping it back is the easiest way from a user perspective anyway, to make sure that they're giving you the data that you want, because there's a minimal amount of things that they can see that you're asking for.
And do you recommend, obviously you need to keep your data organized. So do you ever recommend to customers that they should document their data structure like outside of HubSpot?
Yes, I am very big fan of a spreadsheet, and I know some people hate them. So we do work with clients to map out the data structure at an object level, and hopefully you haven't got lots of users in your portal that have got permission to make changes, but at least if you've got it
Yes.
mapped out external, you know what your kind of source of truth is and what it should be. Um,
I think that's a good point. Like we definitely a couple of years ago locked down the how many super admins we have because that's a really big problem, isn't it? When you go into a portal and see they're like they've got like 40 users and 39 of them are super admins, so they can make new fields and do all of that and sections, and that causes a big problem, I guess, because if you've really thought hard and documented a data structure in a spreadsheet or whatever, but then people are just like going rogue, then those two, the documentation is only going to match the actual structure in HubSpot the very first time you've sort of created that.
yeah,
So don't have too many super admins.
yeah,
Big
top tip.
rule. So I think it's important to say that you can have like the best structure in the world, you can have minimal super admins, you're going to be so hot on that, but there are always going to be times when you stop and realize actually things have crept in over time, your data's messy. So what steps should businesses take if they're at that point when they realize that they really do need a proper cleanup?
The really good tip is the data hygiene dashboards that we put in place for most of our clients to understand which records within your CRM don't have a value within key data points that you know you need within your business. There's other like third-party tools that you could look at as well for like validation of email addresses and phone numbers if that's something that you're concerned about. Also looking at duplicates. So if you've got Ops Hub Pro, there's the duplicate like flagger duplicate management tool in there that flags contacts and companies that they think are duplicates. And another like maybe less techy solution, if it's in a real mess, especially if you are working in a production portal where you need to be really mindful about the implications of any sort of data changes that you're making, is to export the data and review and clean it externally to HubSpot.
Yeah.
You know, we've worked with client recently on, they had quite a complex like rule set they wanted to put in place to flag up duplicates in that portal. They'd created some properties to capture external IDs from systems they'd integrated with HubSpot, but they didn't have validation on the property to make sure it actually had to be unique
Ah,
records. And with a little bit of help from ChatGPT, we could put in a custom conditional formula in the external spreadsheet, and it highlighted all of the records that we needed to review and merge, which was quite fun.
okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, duplicates are probably like one of the main issues. I guess that yeah, that we find most places will have them. Um, so people do make mistakes, they mess up, and that's all right as long as it gets fixed. But could you share an example of how people get it wrong, how it impacted the business, and how it could, yeah, how it was fixed?
Yeah, I think kind of looping back to things we've spoke about, hopefully if you've got good foundations in place in terms of validation on properties and you've not set everyone up as super admin, then you're gonna mitigate against some of these big issues. One of the biggest messes that I saw ever made was uh, a portal that we got added to, and they'd migrated data into it from various, legacy systems and spreadsheets, and they hadn't mapped the properties, the column headers from their imports to any HubSpot properties. They just created new properties for everything. So there was just a whole mass of duplicate purpose properties. So I guess that's probably a good tip. Like, there's so many default HubSpot properties, like you said, at each object, and new ones are added occasionally. So using what HubSpot is giving you out of the box is a really yeah, good, good thing to try and stick to rather than customizing the
Creating
problem.
new every single
Yeah.
time. Yeah. And if you do like make if you do make a mistake when you're like doing an import,
Mhm.
how do you fix that? So say if you've imported a big like spreadsheet into HubSpot and you realize that you've changed everyone's names
Um,
um to something that like is not right, or you've made some sort of mistake, how do you fix it?
HubSpot's pretty clever. The import tool itself has got really quite sophisticated, so hopefully it's holding your hand enough to prevent you from making those mistakes now. If you do make a mistake, very conveniently, you can export the version history of every individual property in your CRM, so you can revert it back to a previous value, if you
Okay.
to override it.
Okay, so don't panic.
Yeah, you can fix.
Good to know, good tips. Um, and what, so we've spoken about data and properties, but and you briefly mentioned the data hygiene dashboard, which is a dashboard which has got lots of reports on. And can you just for if people haven't heard of that before, can you expand a little bit more on what sort of reports you have in there?
Yeah, so I guess it kind of links to the game, mapping out those key data points in your business process, things that you're going to rely on for segmentation, for personalization of comms, any automation that you want to happen, reports that you need to build out, and then reverse engineering those data points to surface records in your database that have got a gap in them. So, for example, you're going to need first name probably for sending out emails. So show me all the records that don't have a value in first name is a really easy one. First name, last name, emails. If you've got ownership in your CRM database to for either forecasting or access controls, partitioning the data, making sure you surface any records that are unassigned. And you can build out then your dashboard of all these reports that are showing you records in your database that have got gaps in these data points that you've highlighted as being key, is the first part of this. And then the second part is to make sure that you've got a process for reviewing it, because it's okay having this dashboard telling you that you've got
Yeah.
2,000 records with no first name, but you need to make sure that that's being actioned. So often that's one internally assigned CRM manager. Sometimes it's filtered dynamically, the dashboard. So as a user, you're looking at records that you own that aren't compliant to
Okay.
what you need. And then just periodically just kind of reviewing it. And it's not always about just plugging the gap. but doing a little bit of investigation to understand why, like where did it come from? Like how did it enter the system
Yeah.
with a gap in it, and trying to prevent that from happening going
Yeah. See
forward.
if there's a pattern, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. And apart from the data hygiene dashboard and those other sorts of reports, what are the sort of non-negotiable reports that you want to have in HubSpot for like keeping your data clean?
Um, Something that I think is quite fun that I've implemented recently is around using list performance reports
Okay.
to keep on top of how clean the data is. So for example, we use the same process of that we use for building the reports to tell me how many records don't have a first name. And we use that criteria to also build a list. And then on the back end of that, you get a list performance report. So you can see over time, hopefully,
Yes.
that the number of records in your CRM with the missing first name is going down. And if it suddenly spikes up, you want to investigate that to say,
Yes, I like
if
that.
someone's done an import and they've not put first name in, or uh,
Yeah,
yeah, I think that they're quite useful.
love that. Yeah, I've never thought about that, but that's a good shout. Nice. Um, and this is a random one, but are there any sort of more niche reports, your favorite ones that you've built that maybe we wouldn't ever think to see?
I am a bit of a nerd. I quite like playing around with the data sets, and something that I've built out with a client is around like recognized revenue reporting. So normally within HubSpot, you can say that a value, and so a deal value like £100 for a deal and the close date, and it would put all of that £100 in the close date. But often working with clients, and maybe that deal is the service that's going to be delivered over 3 months, so actually they want to recognize that in
Hmm.
three separate parts. And the way that we've implemented that is to use a data set that basically looks to the length of a contract to understand what the monthly value of it is. And then we use like the date to understand, is it active in this month? Is it active in this month? And if it's yes, then it stamps it in. So we could build out reports that were accurate on what was being delivered each month,
Yeah.
which
Okay. That sounds very complicated. Uh, and I have to admit, and actually maybe this is a sort of putting you on the spot a little bit, but well, I'm confessing that I don't understand data sets. I've never understood them. I know they've been a part of HubSpot for a while now, obviously like over a year or so.
yeah.
Like in layman's terms, can you sort of explain what the purpose of data sets are?
Yeah, so I think that there's two main purposes, like reasons for the data set. The first one is that you're able to build a data set and pull in like a set of properties from your CRM for whoever is using the data set to use when building the report. So it's easy for them to build a report because they're not scrolling through hundreds
Okay.
of data points. You're saying these are the 5 data points you need to build this type of report, and they can build it out and add their filters. So it makes it easier for users to build out reports.
Yeah.
And then from a kind of more back-end perspective, you can create calculation properties in HubSpot, and you can put in a formula, but it will only access data from within that one data source. So if I create a calculation property on an object level and on a contact level, sorry, I can only look to other contact properties within my formula.
Yeah.
But if I build a data set and I add in different data sources, such as deals and tickets,
Okay.
can build out formulas, calculation formulas that look to different data sources. So
Right.
you
That
kind
makes
of get
sense.
a bit more complex. And another key thing as well is you can't build calculation properties at a product level in HubSpot, but you can do it in a data set. So it's sort of a bit of a workaround for that one.
Okay. All right. That sort of makes sense. I don't personally think I'll probably need to use them anytime soon, but if anyone's watching and needs to do that sort of thing, that's a good explanation. And this is sort of it's always a boring part. I know, like as a marketer, talking about GDPR and things like that is never the funnest bit, but necessary security. So, what best practices should businesses be following to make sure they're securing the privacy of their customers' data in HubSpot?
So I guess from a security aspect, it's now mandatory for all users to have two-factor authentication, which is great. And if you're an enterprise subscription, you can also set up a single sign-on to kind of further support a
Yeah,
secure login process for how the data can be accessed. Additionally, I guess you can review the level of access that your users are being given to the data and to the tools within your HubSpot portal. So we often work with clients to implement role or region-based access control policies, like using the permissions, like
yeah,
what can they access, what can they do, and a good rule for setting those up is using like a least privilege principle, so granting users the appropriate level of access to perform their duties only,
yeah,
while maintaining the security and then integrity of your data. I guess from a GDPR perspective, I feel like we're quite fortunate with the HubSpot data privacy tools and features. So obviously you need to work with your legal teams to make sure that you're compliant. We can support from a technical like aspect in setting up the GDPR tools and making sure that legal basis for processing data is being captured in the CRM. They've also quite conveniently added a new place to track and manage requests from contacts where they're asking if they can download or delete data that
right,
you
yeah,
about them, and that's something that was added to GDPR. It's kind of two new modules that you can add to your preferences page. So as well as unsubscribing from different, communication subscription types within your portal, they can say, send me all the data, download and send all the data that you've got on me, or delete that data.
yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and
What?
then, sorry, one other thing I was thinking about is it's like a data retention policy. HubSpot is quite good for that. So maybe this also links to an exercise you could take when you first migrate. So you've got this huge legacy data set, but you want to only move across what's relevant, not just in the quality data points, but things that are, it's not really old data. So as
Yeah,
well as that being like something you do from an initial migration, that's something you could do going forward. So, mapping out what your data retention policy is in terms of we only want to hold records that are that, when was the last activity period, basically,
yeah,
and using lists or automation to segment that data to either review it or delete it.
yeah.
I think is another good way to remain compliant.
Okay. That's really good advice. You touched on permissions there. Again, that's something I because there's if if you're especially if like you're a super admin looking at your user settings, there's so many different options, and I'm like, do I use it like do a different team? Is it a custom permission set? If you're in a position, if anyone who's listening is in a position where they know that they need to review their permissions, but they do not know where to start because they've got lots of users using lots of different bits of HubSpot, especially if they're on like an enterprise suite platform. Where do they start?
I think a good place to start is to write up some like user stories.
Yeah,
So, as a marketing manager, I need to do this in HubSpot. I need to access this in HubSpot and get the different roles, the different users using the platform to map that out and come to some sort of agreement external to HubSpot. And then you can kind of use that to build out a permission set in HubSpot to
yeah,
try and align that. Um, if you're lucky enough to have a sandbox environment, then always advise building them out there, testing them out there rather than production, because you're likely to get people that call out and say, I used to be able to do this and I can't do that now. And
yeah,
um, I think that it's really important to have them kind of set up as you need, and also someone who knows how to tweak them slightly if they're not quite right, because otherwise what happens is people just go, all right, I'll just make you a super admin, and then that opens up a whole, you know,
guilty.
Yeah, that's a whole other issue.
Yeah, definitely. Right, that's helpful with the permission stuff. Because I know, like, yeah, like I said, for me, I find that whole piece of it really confusing. I know there's something else that I don't know how long it's been a thing for, but something that when people have asked me about, like, I can't do this or that, or I need to see what they could see in HubSpot. I noticed that there's that thing now where you can, if you're a super admin, you can log in as a user.
Yeah.
Um, I found that really helpful to try and like if there's certain things that people can't see, or like yeah, it's just useful because then like if I'm saying, okay, can my digital marketing executive, is she going to be able to complete this task, like delete this group of contacts, or view these deals. I can, if she's not there, I can just, to make it easy, I can log in as her temporarily and then see what she can see, and then go back to my view and alter the permissions like that. So that's quite a useful little tool as
Yes.
well. Um, okay, so that feels like permissions, that feels like a good point to sort of maybe wrap up and talk about add-ons. Like, is there anything outside of HubSpot that you'd recommend for like the data side of things, for cleaning, tidying, whatever it might be?
Um, I guess maybe not jumping completely outside of HubSpot, but they've just obviously announced all their Breeze AI
Yes.
and there are external data enrichment tools that you can use. But I'm quite excited about the Breeze AI data enrichment, where you can basically use AI to enrich the records in your database based on, what it can find online, and plug some of those gaps that you might have that are on your data quality dashboard that you've built out.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. I can't wait. I haven't looked at that loads yet. I know that like you guys on the expert practices team are trying it out now, but that's really interesting. And I think that all came from HubSpot's acquisition of was it Clearbit
Yes, yeah.
last year. And I was sort of waiting for ages to think, how are they going to use this? And then it sort of appeared. And I think there's a huge, huge step for HubSpot because like you said, there's so many external providers. People use ZoomInfo, Lucia, Rocket,
Mhm.
intent data, and all of a sudden it had to have it within the platform. I almost think there's probably a lot of customers now that are in contract with those external providers, but this could be a huge update to have it all natively in there. And you can do things like form shortening, so that'll make the marketers happy as well. So it's going to be incredibly powerful, but I can't wait to play around with it a little bit more.
Yeah, it looks really fun.
Mhm. All right, I think that brings us to the end. Thank you so much, Hannah. And I'm sure if anyone watching has any questions about data related things in HubSpot, then connect with Hannah. She'll be happy to answer any of your questions. But I hope that's been useful for everyone. And join us in a couple of weeks for our next Beyond the Hub, which will be around Breeze AI.